Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we hang out, we talk about things that are exciting, things that are beautiful, things that are wonderful in gaming. And I figured I'd start off before I get into this with why I always open with that, because people have asked me about that. People have also asked me, hey, why don't you comment on the OGL crisis or this hot topic in gaming or this thing on Twitter? And you know what? I get it. Like, well, first of all, I always appreciate when people, ask me my opinion. It's, kind of one of the reasons I do this. It's nice to be able to talk to people about gaming and this hobby that I love. And I realized, certain hot topics generate interest and push the algorithm, and those videos would definitely do well in the field of just grabbing more attention. But something I've always wanted to be in my life and with this channel is positive. I always wanted to talk about things I love and I'm excited about. And so if that means that I don't talk about certain hot topic issues, that's okay. Like, I don't mind chatting about it on the Discord, but that's not what the show is about. The show is about things that I'm passionate about, and then I want to share that passion with other people. So first of all, good morning to Grom and Tink and Padre. And to our good friend Rook, if you are out there and you are watching, just know that we're all thinking about you, buddy. Thanks, Padre. I mean, that's kind of been the focus. Don't get me wrong. I can soapbox and rant ad nauseum, but that's not what I want to do with this show. There are better ranters. And there are already a ton of shows that talk about the ranting and kind of the mire that we can get bogged down in. And yes, truth and beauty is, right? The triad, truth, goodness, and beauty. And without beauty, yeah, we're going to just stay focused. So we're gonna just kind of jump into this, and today we're talking about the Castle Keeper's Guide. Castle Keepers are what Castles and Crusades calls their GMs, their DMs, their storytellers. And really all that we have, all you need to play is the Player's Handbook and Monsters and Treasures. The only reason I add Monsters and Treasures is because, right, that's 2/3 of the things that players want to interact with, right? Their characters, the Player's Handbook, and Monsters and Treasures. But they put out this gorgeous book, Castle Keeper's Guide. And again, if you're a fan of AD&D, that cover should look familiar. It's a $50 book, and it's well worth it. This thing clocks in at 368 pages. And this is one of those books that I would argue, if you're running D20 Fantasy, it's good to see you, buddy. We need to get a call in this week, man. Just go toss that out into the ether and get good returns from it. And thank you. Yes. If you're running D20 Fantasy, this is a great reference tool for you, even if you're not running Castles and Crusades. I'm going to have a link in the show notes on YouTube where you can go and get this on Drive-Thru RPG. And the reason that I say that is because it is not, how do I want to put this? Sometimes doing reviews is difficult because you want to say something in a certain way, but you don't want it to be negative. So for me, the top Learn to DM book was the first edition AD&D DMG, followed by Arbiter of Worlds, and now I'm looking forward to the Judge's Journal from Acts 2, which is essentially the AD&D DMG plus Arbiter of Worlds kind of mashed together. I think that a lot of Dungeon Master's guides, Storyteller's guides, Castle Keeper's guides are written more for the experienced DM now. They are there to provide alternate rules, alternate ways of looking at the game. Sometimes they put the magic items in there, like they did with the 5th edition book. Well, actually, since 3rd edition, that's really where the magic items have been, aside from 4th edition, where they actually put the magic items in the player's guide, which I loved. And they don't give you a lot of advice on how to run a game. And while there's some advice in the Castle Keeper's Guide, this is the best reference book for a Castle Keeper or a GM that I've come across in a very long time. It is chocked full of ways to, well, let's just kind of go through it. It starts with, much like the old AD&D 1E book, it starts with, hey, how do you make a character? Let's rip that apart and put that back together. Right? What are alternate ways of putting together attributes? What does that do when you change the, are you doing 3d6 down the line? Are you doing 4d6, kind of putting them wherever you want? That changes the style of game that you have, and they walk you through that. How do you make a race? What would it be if you were to change a species or an ancestry or a race? Why would you add a new one? There's some good context around the rules that they put in this game. And they do give you a little opening introduction, and I love that they don't refer to Rule 0. They refer to the tyranny of the rules, and they come back to this multiple times. The idea that when we're telling stories, the rules are there to provide a framework, and the dice tell a story. But as a castle keeper, as a GM, as a storyteller, you need to be flexible for the needs of the game at the table. That I wish they would have expanded a little bit more on. Yes, there is a real soft spot for intermediate players. You bring up a really good point. Whew, it's blistering hot. So if you're looking for, hey, why would X, Y, or Z, what would that change attribute-wise? That applies to any D20 game. 13th Age, 5th edition, Pathfinder. When you have, it does a look at magic. It has a whole section on magic, not on spells, but on like, what does magic look like in your game? How do you use spell components? Why are they important? What could you use to change up the magic? They got an expanded equipment list, because the player's handbook for Castles and Crusades, let's call it a snapshot. It's an aired snapshot, right? It's the rules as presented to run a game in aired Greyhawk, right? That's because that's where they were coming from. That was the world that they loved, Greyhawk, that style of gaming. And then, they were planning on putting out aired. In fact, one of the first books they put out was the After Winterdark campaign. And so it makes sense that this game is a snapshot of a specific style and moment in time. Castle Keeper's Guide says, hey, let's blow that up. What else do you want equipment-wise? We will help you cover that. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one GM. Hamster of Doom, I am and have always will be your friend. That was a great quote. And a great way to put it, right? The GM is one player at the table. Now, granted, I give the GM a lot more leeway than I give any one player, because they're putting in the lion's share of the work. But yes, right? They even talk about this in this book. I have it pulled up, saved. Again, in chapter 4, which is the first 3 chapters are kind of Castles and Crusades or D20 focus, and then going on, they get more and more flexible as you go. But again, the tyranny of rules brought back up. The pace and mood of the game can be shattered by strict adherence to rules, tables, charts, and the like. It is often far more important to ignore the complex rules in favor of propelling the story and adventure forward. And what do I mean by this? I think it is far more important when you're running a game to make a ruling at the table. If you don't know for certain what the rule is, you probably have a gut reaction. Run with the gut reaction and look up the rules at a later point. I've been in several games. I have run several games where the action is fast and flowing, we're having a lot of fun, and someone asks to do something, and the GM remembers some obscure rule in one of the 6 rule books that they have. Hold on, let me go look that up. 5, 10 minutes go by, and suddenly all of that momentum is gone to find out that grappling gives you a +2, or actually the way this works is this. I'm a fan of saying, here's what makes sense in the moment. If a player goes, wait, I think I know what the rule actually is, listen to that and run with it. And then going forward and between sessions looking up the rule. And I'll put it out there. I'll say, hey, guys, here's the actual rule of the game. Now, when we're all learning the game, that takes, I give a little bit more leeway to the tyranny of rules because we're all learning how the system works. But once you have, partial system mastery, you go forward with it. Thank you, Michael, for the subscription. That's fantastic. Welcome to Iconic Production. John Doom. Good to see you, buddy. Looking forward to our Savage Pathfinder game tomorrow night. So the rest of this book is actually nearly system agnostic, or close enough so that if you're running a D20 game, this book has something for you. There's a huge chapter on NPCs. The world building chapter is chocked full of wonderful and detailed information for getting your own game set up. Is your world an Iron Age? Is it a Bronze Age? What's the climate like? What are different climate types? What are different terrain types? And how does that affect things going forward? Continuing in the world building theme, there's an entire chapter on the city. What does it mean to set up a city so that it feels realistic? There's a ton of great maps and tables if you like to just roll up random charts. There's a bunch of blank city maps, castle maps that you can just copy and use and populate for your own use at your table. There is a massive list of special occupations and businesses. So you can say, oh, hey, yes, this is a limner. They're a sign maker. It just adds to the feel of the verisimilitude of your world. Yes, I do think that all cities are built on rock and roll. Unless, of course, it's a Schmitty, in which case it's built on Tootsie Rolls. And then they have an entire chapter on dungeons. Why are your dungeons there? How to put them together? What are traps? And again, this is nearly system agnostic. And because Castles and Crusades is so much of a Rosetta Stone, that it is wonderful to be able to just grab this stuff and put it into other D20 games. Whether you're running 1E D&D, 5th edition, Pathfinder, OSE, this book has something for you. Also just, and then they cover air and water adventures. And this is dumb, but one of my favorite parts of the book. I don't know if this is going to show up on the camera. Probably not. I'll take a picture and post it on our Instagram and our Discord channel. Each of the chapters is color-coded, and when you look along the inner line, or the inner edge of the book, you can see where the chapter breaks are by the colors that fade across the edge of the page. We get a chapter, we'll skip that one. There's a chapter on equipment wastage if you want that level of nitty-gritty. Verisimilitude is the feeling that something is real. So it's when we read the Second Apocalypse or the Lord of the Rings, and it feels like a real world. It feels as if it's all internally consistent, even if we don't have uh, the proper understanding, or if it's a fantastical world. In our interview with Alexander, verisimilitude is also linked to noetic appreciation, right? The fact that the details do matter and it draws me into the world. It makes me believe the world is real. I don't have to suspend my disbelief. Speaking of, we've mentioned a couple of Beyond the Tables. We actually have another Beyond the Table today at 3. Because we're doing a month of Castles and Crusades, I thought it would be appropriate to bring Stephen Chenault back on, and he has graciously agreed to do that. We're going to be talking with Stephen. We're specifically going to be talking about the Umbridge saga, which I covered on Tuesday's show. This grand adventure path that they just released a new version of. I have the box sets. You can now buy a single full-color hardcover book called The Undying War that I think is the first 11 or 12 adventures, which I will probably pick up and do a review on the show. I love my box sets, but they are black and white, and I just want to see what great art has been put into there, and it's nice to have it all in, a single book. It covers domain play, this Castle Keeper's Guide, and it gives you some really broad advice for giving land as treasure, which is something I think in the more modern games we have gotten away from, right? It used to be at like level 9 or 10 you got a keep, and that was because you were supposed to shift from an adventurer to a conqueror to a king. Hey, man, that's a great name for a game. And I think in the playtest documents for the new edition of D&D, they're trying to add that back in. Matt Colville did Kingdoms and Warfare and his mass combat. I do miss having keeps, and so this gives you some great advice for mass combats, how to use mass combat simply, land as treasure. John Alb did a domain supplement for Savage Worlds, which I need to read. He sent it to me. I'm going to print it out and read it, and I'll let you know what I think of it. Some advice on monsters and ecology and how to change that up. And then we get an entire chapter on if you like your D20 system, but you'd really rather move past the Middle Age Renaissance era, how do you do that? All the way to the future. And the last couple of chapters are really set on tweaking the siege system, really making it your own. How do you advance your game? How do you break and change the siege engine to make it your own? Do you want to add tertiary attributes? Do you want to change up how that target number works? Because there's another, they give you several options for really customizing the game for yourself. They give you a great chapter on how to hand out treasure, right? Because it's very easy to go too little or too hard. And last but not least, we have a couple of additional chapters just dealing with other types of combat, using skills in Castles and Crusades, which I wouldn't. I think the siege engine works very smoothly without skills. And then last but not least, an entire chapter on character death. And not just when they die, but how they die. You can get diseases, divine intervention, insanity, death and dying, changing the rules up for that. And this is one of the best indexed books that I have on my shelf, which is always something that I appreciate in the book. I'm doing some research for a Deadlands book that I'm writing, and it was just great to go to the Deadlands book and say, what happened to Grimm? And find 3 entries in the index and immediately be able to find what I'm looking for. If you're designing your own role-playing book, let me just say, a good index is worth its weight in gold. Also, and we did this with, Daryl did this with Space 1889 after, a good cross-reference book is worth its weight in gold. So, that is the Castle Keeper's Guide. It's $50 for the core book, or for the physical book. It's beautiful, it's full color, and I hope that I have shared how much is packed into this book. And again, while there are nuggets of advice throughout the whole thing, this is really a reference book for an intermediate and beyond game master. If you're running a D20 fantasy game, or even something D20 adjacent, you don't have to be playing Castles and Crusades to get a ton of use out of this book. So hopefully, this has piqued your interest and you're going to go check it out. Castle Keeper's Guide for Castles and Crusade by Trollord Games. Very easy to say, it just rolls right off the tongue. Next week, we're going to continue our look at Castles and Crusades, but I'm really excited about this afternoon, where we will be talking with Stephen Chenault of Trollord Games. Again, talking about the Undying War, the Umbridge Saga, and probably a lot more stuff in between. And hopefully, maybe teasing out some information on The Hermit, which was their last Kickstarter that they ran. Gary Gygax's adventure, The Hermit. So, until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Till next time, have a good one.